It is now 6:59, and I am going to call the Public Works Committee to order. I am Sheila Vaccaro. Bernie Flynn is not with us tonight, and I'm with Brian Travis. Calling the meeting to order. Going on to comments, suggestions, and positions by residents in attendance. Okay.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. I was informed of a second tire cut on the sharp granite curbs. Is there any plan for making the streets safer for the motoring public? Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, we can move on to the discussion items. A is the monthly report. We're going to start with the Borough Engineering Report.
Hi, thank you. This is Kelly Goff. I am one of the consultants for the borough. I'm with RVE. I'm going to review some of the items that RVE has been working on for the past month and a half since I last came to this meeting. So we continue to hold progress meetings with borough staff, monthly progress meetings. At these monthly progress meetings, we review the status of various projects and review grant opportunities coming up. Under the Price Street Corridor project, concerns of speeding was noted along this intersection, and RVE worked with PennDOT to get striping and signage approved at that intersection. PECO, PennDOT, and the Public Works Department are coordinating on scheduling this work. Under the High Street project, this project scope includes ramp improvements along High Street from Minor to Rosedale Avenue. This is a PennDOT project. This project was awarded in March to Marino Corporation. A notice to proceed was issued in April. I spoke to the contractor today, Marino. He does plan to start as soon as possible. It is my understanding that they are working on getting some submittals approved with PennDOT. Under the Higher Minor Street project, this project includes improvements at the Minor and High Street intersection. This is being funded by the Chester County Community Revitalization Program. This project is substantially completed. We are still working on punch list items as well as the PennDOT inspection, and we are currently reviewing payment number 2 request and reviewing and processing that request. Under the Gay Street closure project, this project includes the installation of gates along Gay Street. This project is being funded by a Chester County grant. RVE recently met with borough staff and we're reviewing various design components. We're compiling a cost estimate for the various components for this project. And lastly, under the MS4 services, the borough has various state mandated requirements under the terms of the borough's MS4 permit. RVE is working with the staff in order to ensure that the borough meets those requirements. On May 29th, the permit renewal was approved by PADOP. We received notification on May 29th. Conditions are similar to the last term. The terms last 5 years. We are also reviewing outfall inspection needs with the borough staff. Needs are based on when the last time an outfall was inspected and if there was an illicit discharge found at that inspection. It's found at that particular outfall at the last inspection. We are also working on a pollution reduction plan and TMDL addenda. The addenda will be part of the original PRP and TMDL that was approved by PADOP in 2018. Again, this is a state mandated plan. The purpose of the plan is to reduce sediment loading as well as total phosphorus within the borough. The original plan had BMPs that included locations at various parks, tree plantings, street sweeping, stream bank restoration, and filtering devices. There were a few BMPs that were found to be not feasible. So the borough and RVE are working together to create an addenda to add additional BMPs in order to meet your loading reduction requirements. So I will review some of those BMPs that are proposed in the draft addenda at this time. A bioswale and rain garden near the Public Works Building, a bioretention garden at the end of Maple Avenue, a bioswale near the fire company. We will also still be doing tree plantings, street sweeping, and various BMPs at the parks. The stream bank restoration was found to be not feasible, and the filtering devices were also found to not be feasible. Additionally, we are proposing roadway bump out gardens, rain gardens, to collect stormwater runoff. Right now, there's 13 locations listed in this draft addendum. There's several listed on Matlack that include the intersections at Magnolia, Union, Barnard, Linden, East Market, Lacey, East Nields, East Minor, East Market. There's also a North Walnut and East Market intersection location. There are bump outs proposed at Franklin and Market, Worthington and Unions, and Adams and Bernard. In terms of the rain garden bump outs that the borough is planning, here is a list of benefits expected. Stormwater management, including pollution reduction and the reduce of flood risk. Traffic calming, studies have shown that installing bump outs will reduce the speed of vehicles and encourage slower turning speeds of vehicles. Aesthetics will be improved, and safety for pedestrians. The bump outs typically increase sight distance and create a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. So at this time, the PRP addenda and the TMDL addenda, they're only required to have locations specified in the addenda. A design is not required at this time. The addenda includes more than, so at this point, the calculations, so it's based on a reduction, or you have to reduce your pollution load by 10%. So right now we're reducing it with this plan by about 15%. The reason for that is because we may find that some of these are not feasible, which is basically what happened during the first round of the PRP and TMDL. So we're basically adding more than enough so that when we do find ones that are not feasible, we'll be able to still have some listed in the approved PRP and TMDL. We are also working with the borough to develop a conceptual plan of a sample intersection of these proposed rain garden bump outs. And with that conceptual plan, it will basically be representative of a typical sample intersection within the borough. And we will perform a vehicle turning analysis on certain trucks that may be going through that intersection. And the purpose of the conceptual plan will be to help visualize the bump out improvements for the community leaders as well as the residents. Please let me know if you have any questions about the PRP and the TMDL addenda.
Don't have any questions, but I'm glad you're going to do the sample because I think there are a lot of concerns about the turning radius, and we didn't want to completely quash the idea because we know we're behind on some of these initiatives, and we haven't had a whole lot of other options, and some of them that we did have seem to be not feasible. Could you explain the one around the stormwater? I'm sorry, the stream bank not being feasible?
Yes, so the stream bank has very specific requirements in order to gain this credit for reducing your pollution. And a lot of times, I guess in the past few years, we found that municipalities that have found that the stream bank restoration is not feasible, specifically due to the riparian buffer width that's required. It's required to be at least 35 feet on both sides from the top of bank out.
And one of the project locations for this type of installation was Cedar Alley between Adams and South Franklin Street. And it's just not feasible to go 35 feet out in either direction without taking private property.
Thank you.
Question?
I know that there is going to be some serious pushback against these rain gardens. I do want to say that do we have an idea of how many parking spaces we will be losing if we got all of these installed?
I do not have a calculation in front of me. I will say that cars are typically not allowed to park that close to an intersection, even without a bump out. So I'm not sure if any spots will be eliminated with these bump outs.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. There, I'm on the other side of the borough and they put these in and they've caused problems mostly because there are not cars parked on those streets. And it's confusing to have a wide open street that used to be wide suddenly have pieces of sidewalk where you used to be able to drive your car. The fact that you're not able to drive your car down a tight street where there are cars parked on either side, I think this is, from my perspective, it's a better location for some of these bump outs. I understand the community pushback because of the tight radius and the perceived loss of parking spaces. So I think if you're going to go forward with this, you really have to prove those to the community very, very much. So please do that. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Did you say high in Market Street for a bump out? Okay. I'd suggest everybody take a look at the curbing at High and Minor prior to approving any new bump outs. There's been a great deal of tire marks added to them, and the turning radius seems to be a problem.
Okay, moving on to Public Works.
Good evening. During the past month, the major tree debris in Goose Creek to Route 202 was removed. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that some of that debris had been there for decades and created a water obstruction for many years. We still have more work to do, but I have no doubt that this work will reduce flood levels along this creek and reduce the amount of time of flooding in the South Franklin Street area. We also opened bids for the 2024 paving project, which is on the agenda tonight. The low bidder is qualified and the price is under our cost estimate. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Do you know what happened to the tree on 50 block of South A Street?
Okay. Yes, it appeared, and I think council was informed, it appeared that a truck had hit the truck and it uprooted the tree. It was at the point where the tree had to be removed. It was referred to the police department, but I have not heard if they have found what was probably a vehicle that hit that tree.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to say thank you for the work that was done on Sharpless Street with the trees as well. So thank you.
Can I add one thing to what Kelly said about this PRP plan? I just think it needs to be mentioned that the PRP map and all these locations is conceptual in nature, and it will not go forward without the required turning radius analysis. And so some of these things the intersections may get dropped off or changed or whatever. I just want to make the point that that's just a conceptual plan.
Thank you. Let's move on to wastewater.
Good evening. This past month, we had a good one where we had a pump at our pump station in the plant clog, trip out, and we found numerous socks jammed up in the impeller, somehow got through so anything can come down the sewer line. That was fixed and cleaned out and everything was put back in. We had a broken flexi shaft replaced on one of our mono pumps. A broken drain. Valve stem was broken. We dug down, cut it off, welded a new seat on, made sure everything worked, put that back in play. Replaced a 3-inch utility water valve. We had 2 new pumps brought in that we purchased under a capital project. One was installed right off the bat. The other, we had to jackhammer out a concrete base from an old pump. That was taken care of. Both pumps are now running and installed and running well. We can actually even see the difference in the way the plant's accepting them. Goose Creek flowed just over 678 million gallons per day as an average. Taylor Run replaced the motor on their soda ash feed. They replaced a broken water line on their mechanical seal, rebuilt their aluminum pump and diaphragm, rebuilt their analyzer for the sump pumps, and grinded, sanded, and primed off rust off their building for B4. Their average flow for the month was 776 million gallons per day. And tomorrow at Finance, we will be asking for a contract to have our soda ash silo primed and painted come through at half of the price that we budgeted.
Wonderful.
That's good news. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to Parks and Rec.
Try and keep this short and sweet, but June was a great month for Parks and Rec. Hi, I'm Keith Karowski, Director of Parks and Rec Department. June started off with a bang. Turk's Head Music Festival, the 41st annual, and by far and away, post-pandemic, the largest crowd we've had. Estimates were in the 10,000 range. I don't know if that's true or not. That's throughout the day. That's not at any one point in time. But it was a fantastic event. Mother Nature had a little something to do with that. It was a beautiful day. Also, I mentioned it in my report too, the fact that I have a budget to pay some of the bands. In the years previous, we didn't really pay the bands or gave them a very small stipend, and that kept a lot of the high quality acts from coming. Now that we can give them a little something for coming out to that event and the history behind the event, it helps out a great deal. So thank you very much. Another event I want to touch on is what ended the month, which was our first ever mini golf on Gay Street. Although Mother Nature was not quite as pleasant, let's say, it was more of a day like today, we still had over 250 people come out. And I'm sure that had I not called it a little early for the storms that were coming through that evening, we would have had many more. It took about an hour for people to play, thanks to our sponsors that donated to make that event possible. Country Bagel, Saloon 151. There was 2 others. Our sponsor, I can't think of they're a vintage sports gear. Shibe Sports, thank you very much. That came to me right then and there. But that's just 2 of the events that took place. We had another event, a concert in the park, our first one that was at Everhart Park. Again, Mother Nature was a little hot and nasty, so we didn't get the crowd we wanted. It's just, I mean, after doing this for 20 years, you just roll with the punches with Mother Nature. It's the one thing that controls so much of what we do that I have little to no change with, unfortunately. To touch base on some of the park activities that are taking place, you can see in the report that our Public Works Department, along with a contractor, did some minor repairs to John O'Green Park. That's going to be a bigger issue. That's going to be discussed at the pros committee that we're working with right now. Actually, the next steering committee meeting for the pros plan is tomorrow at 3:30, I believe, in room 232. More so what we'll be discussing at that is implementing our plan moving forward, how we get this information out to the public. But just wanted to touch base that John O'Green Park, literally since its inception, has been a headache. The park, the idea of the park, the concept behind the park, having a water park and water play features there is fantastic. But the idea of poured in place rubber for the fall zone, it was just a bad idea from the start. We've been playing catch up literally since day one. We will work through plans moving through that with the pros plan and the steering committee and be presenting that to council probably October, maybe November, hopefully October. But one thing I wanted to touch on moving forward, if Bill could pull it up, could you, Bill? Boom. I said we got more events coming on Gay Street. I'm giddy about this one too. We're working with several different folks in town and some real deal high-end vendors that are going to be coming out to do a virtual golf event in conjunction with the Open Championship that takes place that same weekend. So that trailer you see will be coming and be parked right next to Kildare's on Gay Street, along with a net system. And we've tested it out here. You can see the net system in the back of the room. We got to make sure it worked properly before taking it uptown. But it's going to be a great event from 4 to 9, right next to Kildare's on Gay Street. Just like I was saying at the mini golf event, no one has ever mini golfed on Gay Street. Well, the last time I checked, I don't think anyone can say they ever virtual golfed on Gay Street either. So these are all kind of first ever events that are taking place. Again, Mother Nature will have quite a say in what we get done or we don't get done. And most, if not all, the costs are going to be paid for by the actual residents or non-residents that are coming to partake in the event, or the sponsors' dollars that are coming from behind it. So it's not really costing too much money out of my budget, except for the startup fees until we actually collect the monies from the patrons. I plan on doing another event with the university in August. That'll be August 23rd. That is called Welcome Back Weekend / Adult Field Day, and there'll be more information in the August meetings that'll go towards that. In pairing with the university, I know we don't have the greatest relationship with them, but hopefully we can repair some or take care of some low-hanging fruit to keep some relationships open. I'm working with a really great group of folks from the university that want to not only promote the borough as a whole in what we have to offer, but also introduce the incoming freshmen to, this is your home for the next 4 years. Kind of like the town gown committee, and the fact that, we're going to be living amongst the students and the residents, have got to get along. And hopefully small events like this can help pave the path for that moving forward. It should be a really cool event, but I don't have all the details. I just know the date's going to be the 23rd of August, and it's literally going to be covering all of the Gay Street closure as well. If you have any questions about any events, activities, park projects, I'm happy to answer them.
I do.
Fire away.
How are we communicating to, when we're using Gay Street, how are we communicating with the borough businesses about what's happening, when it's happening, who's going to be on the sidewalk in front of their store?
Sure. Well, in this case, the two events, like this event is only in front of Kildare's and right next to them, which is the, I forget the name of the restaurant, right next to them. Sedona, thank you. The mini golf event was more widespread. I'm working with John at the bid and the individual restaurants and retailers in general. We're only using the spaces that are not being used. So I'm not taking up any space that isn't currently being used by someone else. So we have the activation zones. That's what we're using. I'm not taking space away from anyone else that is there. The whole idea behind this concept is to bring more people to the downtown to support the businesses there.
I love you bringing more people to the borough. I think we need to improve our communications. I was in a meeting this morning. Discussions came up about an event that I was not aware of that didn't go through the channels, and there were tables out on the sidewalks, and no one knew what was happening.
Which event it was?
I cannot remember the name, and I had it written down, and
There was an event, probably, I want to say May-ish. It's like an ultimate scavenger hunt type thing. And again, they totally did not do it. They asked for permission to hold an event in town, which they've done for years. But it was totally unbeknownst to me that they were going to be taking up sidewalk space. So they went ahead and took some more liberties that were not given to them. And I only found about that after the fact.
So I think that we need to get a handle on that kind of thing happening and make sure that as the borough, we are saying that, you're working with Kildare's, obviously.
Yeah.
That's good. That's wonderful. Make sure that we promote who we're working with and how this is being done, so that the rest of the little teeny boutiques are not feeling squashed. Because I think the perception is that we are doing a lot for these restaurants and then ignoring the retail shops and barber shops, and they shouldn't. I want a barbershop event. Like, put that on. Get chairs out there, haircuts down the middle of the street. I don't know.
We could probably do that.
Do it. I'm just saying, I think we need to figure out a way to communicate the events and what is going to be made available or taken from the retail as smoothly as possible. It's not an easy task, but
Certainly. And
Anything
I
you could do.
agree. Yes, this is the first summer we've really taken advantage of the Gay Street closure. And I know moving forward, we're doing some serious infrastructure work to make it even better moving ahead. And I think our communication will grow and will get better. I mean, I've had numerous different entities reach out to me how they can go about doing this or doing something next to their spot or in an activation zone. And we're kind of using the special event application process, but it's not as involved. The street's already closed. It's kind of just claiming the space or making sure the communication there. So, ABC doesn't mix with XYZ and they're both fighting over the same space. It has been a bit of a challenge, but I think we'll work through those this summer. It'll probably be bumpy at times, but like same thing. I want to be able to use those spaces to promote our downtown and our businesses as much as humanly possible.
I've been leaning on John O'Brien. I want to see the street much more organized. I think without having the gates there, this doesn't really, people can't comprehend what I'm asking for, but I want to be able to drive a fire truck down either the middle of the street or one side of the street in an emergency situation. There's no chance that we
Right
can
now?
do that right now. So I'm asking for a ridiculous amount, and I know that, but I'm going to keep asking because I think it's at some point it's going to be necessary. I also want to have the growers market down the street. So, all of a single side, the trucks parked all along it and the stalls set up. Of course, I want ridiculous things, but I'm going to keep asking, and anything you can do to make some of that happen would be
I will
greatly
work on it.
appreciated.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Anything else?
I'm really looking forward to the October, November, the plan that you're coming out with
Same
for
here.
the parks. I think a lot of people have been eager to see what that looks like, especially for John O'Green Park.
Agree.
And because I walk by there almost on a weekly or daily basis. And the sprinkler system that we used to have with like the frogs and stuff like that, it just doesn't feel quite as it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's missing something. And I'd just like to see a lot more attention get focused in that area. Appreciate what you're doing though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right, moving on to the action items. A motion to approve a bid for paving of Borough Roads, Glasgow, Inc. in the amount of $348,600.
I'll be happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned earlier, good price, good contractor, and I recommend that we move it forward.
Um,
I don't think you're on mic, but I can hear you.
Yes, I'm good with this.
Good. All right, we'll move that to work session.
Move that to work session, yes. Motion to approve a bid for construction of Goose Creek Stormwater Management Facilities, 205 Lacey Street and Matlack Street in the amount of $246,848.
Hello.
Hey.
I think the barbershop idea on Gay Street is a bad idea, personally. I wouldn't enjoy it. So we discussed this in a lot of detail last month. Billy, do you have that presentation for me? So we opened a bid. Unfortunately, we only got one bid. It's $246,848, which is right about what we were expecting. It's broken out into a base bid. Here's a overview of the project location. Public Works Facility and South Matlack Street, Lacey Street, $247,000 approximately for the bid plus the alternate. 176 for the base bid, which is the 2 rain gardens and the bioswale on the public facilities, Public Works facility. and then about 71,000 for a pair of bump outs on South Matlack Street. The action item is to recommend approval of the base bid plus alternate, maybe just the base bid to Borough Council next week. Here's a project timeline, how we got to now. Conceptual design, really just for the rain gardens and bioswale. Last year, we wrote and 2 grants, got them both. So that's $319,000 of someone else's money to do this project with, not stream protection fee. With that in mind, we went back to our engineers and said, how can we spend this money? And with the revisions to the PRP coming up and a lot of these bump out projects we proposed, we thought this is a great opportunity to do sort of a test project. We have bump outs elsewhere in the borough, but not really in locations like this. So that's how we got to now. The one bid I mentioned is Premier Concrete. That name might sound familiar. They just finished the project up at High and Minor Street. I think I can speak for the team when I say they did great work. They communicated well. It's a PennDOT road project, and whenever you're working with PennDOT, you're going to get a couple curveballs from them, and they handled them very nicely and without change orders, which is the most important thing. The bid is beneath the threshold for the responsible contractor ordinance, but High and Minor Street was above, and they were certified through that process. So according to the borough, Premier Concrete is a responsible contractor by the terms of our ordinance, even though it's not necessary for this project. But again, I want to talk about the bump outs. Good conversation last month, good conversation tonight. Not exactly warm and fuzzy. And so based on the initial feedback from last month, we decided to bid that out as an alternate. So frankly, if you don't like it, you can turn it down. But I want to spend some time talking about them and going through some of the feedback. I want to back up and start with a little bit of what and why. BMP is a term we throw around, not thinking much of it, but it's BMP stands for best practice, best management practice. It's a fancy term for small scale stormwater infrastructure. Why build them? We have to. DEP requires that we build them. And that mandate was really what led to the creation of the stream protection fee about 8 years ago now. We're trying to come up with money to do that, not to mention replace our existing stormwater system, not to mention make it better to address some of the flooding that we have. So we have to do this, and we should do it because everyone we build helps mitigate flooding. Every project is only going to move the needle slightly. But on the right here, this is a guide to green stormwater management, stormwater infrastructure published by Brandywine Conservancy and Brandywine Red Clay Alliance. DEP issued something similar. It's written for engineers. It's not written for, no offense, but normal people. I can say that I'm married to an engineer. But on the list here is basically all the BMPs that municipality can build. We don't have the ability to build a lot of these because we're space constrained. It's a recurring thing. Talk about it every month about something different. We want to do this, but we don't have space to do it. So we only have a few of these options at our disposal. Good locations for them, downstream from impervious area where water is going to run off, but upstream from flooding, so you can intercept it before it gets to somewhere that's flood prone. And what we've been doing is building them on borough property or right away in uncrowded areas because, it kind of makes sense. But we're kind of maxed out on borough property. We got some here, right outside the window there, up in the corner of the property. Across the street, there's a bump out of Chestnut Street. We've done John O'Green Park. We've done Greenfield Park. And keep in mind, we're just talking about Goose Creek at this point, Goose Creek watershed. Now we've got 3 proposed at Public Works facility. That's it. We're out of space on our property. So we need to start looking into the right of way to do projects or start acquiring properties or permanent easements to build them on other people's private properties. This is the only way we're going to, again, move the needle on flooding and meet DEP's mandates. Going back to...
quick
Yeah.
question on that last topic.
Sure.
Can we incentivize that if it is on private property? I mean,
Yeah.
Some residents may be willing to do this.
Yeah, small scale residents are incentivized through the stream protection fee. You can reduce or eliminate your fee if you build small things on your property. You can do structural engineered stuff like underground cisterns, and we give you money for installing rain barrels, things like that. Don't have a ton of takers. So we're kind of looking at that, seeing how we can make it more user friendly and more accessible to people. Yeah, if we could do larger scale stuff on larger properties, like some of our industrial properties down in the southeast, we could actually make a big impact and really start reducing stream protection fee. But that was one of the reasons behind the fee and the credit program is to incentivize people to do this.
I mean, I think people forget. They see the bill and they forget that they can reduce their
Yeah.
fee. It might be. I mean, I know that there's an annual essentially communication around that, but it might be worth just communicating out some more options again. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I agree. We've talked about it offline, but we used to have this like paper application, reapplication process, and all that streamlined. It's electronic now, and so we're working on making that more approachable. Because I think what people see is, oh, I can get a credit, but I got to go to this website and do this thing, and it's government, and I don't want to deal with that, so I'll just pay the bill. It's not worth my time, but maybe we can make inroads there. Next slide, Billy. This thing is. Yeah. All right. So going back to our BMP types, we've proposed 3 different types here, 2 rain gardens along Lacey Street, sort of where there's grass areas now, and then there's large bioswale. Again, these are just fancy words. They all do the same thing. They collect water, they hold it for a while, they infiltrate some down, and they're vegetated because the plants do good things for stormwater quality. Bunch of different fancy words. It's all the same thing, really. And why we love this location, why the grantors love it. It's basically 2.5 acre drainage area. It's roughly mapped here. These lines are not exact. About 2 acres of it is impervious. This is a slam dunk location. It's upstream of flooding. And again, we maxed out what we could on borough property, but ultimately ran out of space, which is why we started looking to the right of way. So that's our project, 3 different BMP types proposed. But again, most of our conversation has revolved around bump outs. So I want to talk about them specifically, address some of the things we've heard. Safety first. Let's start with safety. Bump outs, it's important to note, they stick out a lot less than a parked car. We have 7 projects installed in 2018, 2019. We've had no reported accidents at any of them, which means it hasn't been, if there have been accidents, they haven't had injuries or property damage. So they haven't garnered any attention from the police department, who we got this information from. We've also sustained no property damage in our facilities, which is not too surprising. I mean, if someone ran through it, we would know. But they're sort of designed. I mean, it's really just a curb and dirt and plants. And then there's an off-the-shelf PVC pipe that runs underground into a drain. And then there's this iron dome, which is kind of indestructible, that sits on top. So, we've heard people run into them. I'm going to have to disagree with that based on the data and that we haven't had any damage to them. Nonetheless, signage, reflective signs were installed here. We think that's a great idea. So based on that feedback, we put that into the bid. So if we elect to build these, they'll have signage to alert drivers so they don't run into them. Space and turning is another thing we talked about. Kelly said, like Don said, these are designed with turning in mind. This particular location, there's actually only 2 turns that can occur. Going down Matlack, you can turn right on the Lacey or you can turn left on Lacey. 2 turns versus a normal 4-way stop, 2 ways each direction. There's 8 possible turns that could be made. So turning radius is important, but you don't have to plan for all these turns. It's really just 2. We coned out the location of where these would be. So you can see there's still, this is a small car here, but you can see the cartway is still huge, even if the bump outs are installed here. And then lastly, looking at the plan view over here, they're set back from the intersection. And that's intentional to make sure that there's radius. That orange line there is really the curb line of Lacey Street. So they're set back to make turning easier. I'll point out one more thing here. See that utility pole right on the corner? That's the impediment to turning here. It's been there for decades and never had any problems. So these bump outs as proposed are not going to negatively impact turning here. Maintenance, truth be told, like I said, a lot of these projects were built were built in 2018, 2019. During COVID, I mean, COVID was crazy. Looking at April, I mean, we put a stop on all spending that wasn't critical to keep this place going. That including very critical second year landscaping of those projects that were a year or two old. A lot of stuff died back. People stole plants out of them. So we had to replant where people went in and took the plants that we did plant in there. Don Edwards and I rewrote the maintenance spec in 2023. We were also getting kind of like Joe Schmo landscaper out of our maintenance bid. We have an annual maintenance contract, but we were just getting like the same people who mow and edge in the parks. And this is sort of a specialty skill set. So we rewrote the bid specs and we've gotten a really good contractor the last 2 years and we've reinvested in planting. This is from a few weeks ago up on Chestnut Street. It doesn't always look like this, but we're not Longwood Gardens. This is sort of function over fashion. The plants serve a purpose, but at the end of the day, we have a budget we're accountable to, and a contractor that we have to hold accountable. So I wish they looked like this year round, but no garden does. The other thing we have is we have volunteers. We knew we had people working in them, which kind of made us like warm and fuzzy, but also nervous. So we formalized that program. We had a training. We got about a dozen volunteers. We got every rain garden that has 1 or 2 volunteers. And they're also signing liability thing, which says, if they injure themselves, it's on them for doing that. So that's been a good thing. And thank you to those people for doing that. Parking is probably the biggest concern. 400 South Matlack is interesting. It's actually, for the Southeast, it's relatively low stress. All but 3 houses have off-street parking. And there's pretty abundant on-street parking. Nearmap, we have this software called Nearmap, which it's like high-end Google Maps. We get 4 images a year, satellite images. We went back, we looked at the past 16. Now, granted, 2 or 3 of those were when the campus was closed. A lot of the parking is student rental driven, but 100% of the time, looking at the last 16 satellite images, there's been at least 5 empty parking spaces on this block, which tells us that people can park here. And if you go up here, this time of year, it looks like this. There's no one parked there. We were out there 5:30 a couple weeks ago. There was 2 cars parked on the whole street. We don't have a parking problem. It's a student rentals and a cars per student rental problem, which Ramsey and her team are doing fantastic work to address and get that under control. So the other thing is we looked really hard at all the no parking areas on here, fresh eyes on an old problem. And we found 2 of the no parking areas, which is more than 2 total car lengths, were never codified. We think it's people going out on the curb. They don't like people parking in front of their houses, so they painted the curb yellow. So we put some signage up just to make sure there's nothing that nothing that's slipping through the cracks, and we're going to remove those. So regardless of whether we move forward with this project or not, there's going to be more parking on South Matlack Street. The other thing is looking over here, this is more when school's in session, you'll see there are cars parked here. Here's one parked illegally in the intersection. There are cars elsewhere here in the frame, spaces elsewhere in the frame empty, but the bump outs really only impede about half a car length. So that's what I was saying. We're going to get more than 2 spaces back, and we're taking away about 1. And the absolute curb line matters. It's not about spaces. How many times have you said, I could park there if there was only 3 more feet? Like I said, there's going to be a net addition of parking on 400 blocks South Matlack Street. A couple other things we heard, why don't you plant trees instead? I actually did the math on this. We have to plant 111,000 trees to meet our DEP goals. That goes to show what DEP thinks of tree planting. No, I'm not even going to say any further about what that would look like. Why don't you build it elsewhere? Great idea. We need to build them elsewhere. And in time, we kind of have to. But this project, while we picked this location, is the proximity to the original grant scope of work, which was funded. We can use the grant money to use it in that adjacent intersection. So way too much information about stormwater, bump outs. But like I said, some things we heard that I personally feel like we need to address and look at factually. Again, 247,000 is the total. It's broken 176 and about 71,000 for the alternate. Most importantly, no cost to stream protection fee and the people that pay it to get this built. So with that, I'll take any questions.
I don't think I have any questions, but I do appreciate you thoroughly addressing a lot of concerns that we heard, and some of those were actually up here. And the pictures help, quite honestly. The aerial shots help. I do think we're underestimating the parking situation on Matlack Street, quite frankly, when I'm getting a head nod from, I mean, it won't look like that, and it'll be pretty much full all the way up. But, I think in your analysis and your assessment of determining what's the yellow curve and where can parking happen, and I think going through that whole essentially audit process of figuring out where these rain gardens go is going to be fruitful. So appreciate all that work.
Will you be there next week to present all of this again?
If you'll allow it.
I think I will not be there next week, but I think that the rest of council needs to hear all of this. I do feel a little guilty for talking about the rain gardens and the cars hitting the rain gardens down on Neal Street. I think it's a completely different situation.
Yeah. I'm sure it's happened.
I mean, it's when they first put them there, it was scary when you would be driving down Neal Street and you go, oh right, there's a whole thing there because no one parks there. It's an extremely different situation. Anyhow, I feel guilty for that, but this is important. I think that we really need to be doing some of this. Yes, of course, I want it on Price Street as well, but I think that this is far more important. Price Street is I wish there would be more traffic, slower traffic. It's a different issue. So please present this, in my opinion, to council next week and convince them of the importance.
Sure. I'm sorry in advance for anyone who has to hear it twice.
Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street, right down Lacey Street from Matlack Street. And you'll notice none of these pictures, satellite pictures, are taken in the dark, which is when everybody is home. And April 19th of 2023, that week is traditionally Greek week when they're all elsewhere. So them being the student renters. The houses on Lacey Street do not all have off-street parking. So the 100 block of Lacey, they do not all have, certainly not sufficient off-street parking. So I'm pushing back on statements that are made about our need for parking. The reason people park closer to the signs, and we have pushed that where it's safe enough to do so, is that we have no parking. Those of us who live on South Franklin Street, the 500 block of South Franklin Street, we have no opportunity because Goose Creek is right there and it enters our property. So I really do. I sat on the Stream Protection Committee. I understand this. But I have a big question, and I asked it 2 months ago. And by the way, 2 months ago, I was told this would not happen for 3 to 5 years. And all of a sudden I see it on the agenda and I'm like, what? So my question is, that big green area that is elevated on the public works property, where we illegally, I may point out, park vehicles that are waiting to be put out to bid and all kinds of stuff, which I've complained about for 30 years. Why aren't we using that? Why are we not using a tunneling, the same kind of tunneling system that would take the flow culvert, I'm not using correct words, into these bump outs and put them into that raised green area that is very large, as you can see, not too well on this picture, but on the other picture you can see, and it has all kinds of stuff parked on it. It's raised above the parking lot that is internal to the Public Works building, and it is purely a put stuff there lot and has been an eyesore for years. So why can that not be used instead of taking parking spaces? And all along Matlack Street, this is going to be a parking issue. We don't know how much because of Ramsey's changes. We don't know that yet. So we're dealing with a few unknowns. Can you answer why we're not using that?
We looked at every corner of the Public Works lot, trying to figure out where to store stormwater. And I think ultimately where we ended up with that question is Public Works needs a new facility desperately. There's no space to do it elsewhere. I mean, really, we don't really have a lot of options. And there was a hesitancy to install hundreds of thousands of dollars in stormwater infrastructure on site here when we might need to repurpose this site for a future public works facility. In other words, spend $150,000 building something and then 5-10 years from now decide we're going to redo this facility and try to modernize it, keep the existing footprint, and dig up the money that we spent. And if it's grant funded, we wouldn't be able to do that anyway. So we looked at that and decided that would be long-term a foolish solution. But the little vegetated areas further to the east there and that bioswale, there's no future use for that site that, for public works operations. And so that's why we felt comfortable claiming that for stormwater management.
I've been waiting for somebody to give the honest answer to that question because I asked it 2 months ago. So I appreciate the honest answer. I suspected that was part of it. So the reality is we have to choose between taking from residents and I agree, we shouldn't do something stupid with money, but I still have great concerns about those bump outs. I think we need to really look at it. I also have concerns about the timeline, and that was the other thing I wanted to make sure. We can't be digging this stuff up during the school year. My God, you saw what was going on Minor Street and how long that took. And if we started doing this during the school year, we would lose more than those parking spaces that we're going to lose on a finished product. So I don't know how this will work. And the other general comment I have is why, when this was in preliminary stages, did no one come to the existing neighborhood organization and say, here's what we're thinking about, help us think it through? Why did that not occur? And you're talking about communication. And I just know, yikes, this is going to be a hard one. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. So if these are put in with grant money, they're permanent and can't be removed?
Nothing's permanent. You just don't want to tear it up in 10 years.
It does bring up a question, though. I know the plan was to to create a sample of one of these. Is it possible to do that before we commit to a longer plan, or is there a phased-in approach to this, or is it all one big, swift construction project, or that would be kind of helpful to understand a little bit in terms of the timing, you know, evaluation, feasibility, once we kind of learn and, test and learn into that sample bump out.
I think what's the decision before council and the committee this week and next is to approve this bid, which includes an out alternate with 2 bump outs. What we do going forward is a process of design that evaluates the feasibility with survey information of whether these facilities can be constructed in the areas. And we might find that they don't work for the reasons people have already brought to our attention: safety, turning, maintenance, and loss of parking. So we'll make a decision and recommendation based upon those factors, whether they're good candidates for these improvements or not. So that will come to you, and you'll have an opportunity then through that process to approve it or not. So there are multiple phases, and I wish I could be swift with all of the infrastructure improvement. I wish I could snap my fingers and make all the infrastructure better in 2 months' time, and that would be great. It just doesn't happen that way in practice. It's something that unfolds over seasons and years and multiple councils and managers. This is a very large scale problem that's not going to be fixed.
So we're still talking about a 3 to 5 year time range, maybe first estimate, and this is just the beginning of that process right now by approving a bid, not really committing to spending these dollars unless we actually know that it's going to work going forward. Is that correct?
It would be pretty costly to.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just saying once we get because the plan is to do the sample to test into it. Is that correct? Okay, right. So right now, the question that's on the table is to approve a bid to move forward with the overall
Yeah.
project.
I think there's some confusion. We keep mixing up two separate things. One is this project, which we plan to build this year. The second is a mid to long term, the PRP, the pollution reduction plan for Goose Creek, which is a plan we wrote originally 5 years ago, which we need to currently revise because so many of those projects that were written in before the regs were really finalized by DEP. Now that we've start to design these projects, you realize, oh, can't do that because you finalized the regs. We didn't know about this 5-6 years ago. So now that the regs have crystallized, we've ruled out all the projects we can't do. We're now required to submit a new plan, 5-10 year plan to DEP that says, here's how we're going to meet the goals. Here are our conceptual projects that will get us there. And that's like, we keep confusing those. So that's like the mid to long term, the 3 to 5 years. And then this is one project that's part of it that's been in the capital plan for 2 years. We talked about one when we were doing grant resolutions last year. It was in the budget. It was in the capital improvement plan. Should be no surprise that this was going to happen this year.
So this little part is this year.
Yes.
Your big plan is 3 to 5 years. Right.
Plus.
Right.
Yes. One of how many projects are in the plan? Like, yeah. Because we need that many to comply with DEP's mandate. And this is just the one that we've started working on last year, design, wrote the grants, got the money lined up to do.
Estimate this one is going to reduce about, it's going to reduce about 1,000 pounds per year and required to reduce sediment loading by 22,000.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying. I'm caught up now. I appreciate that. After, hearing the full scale plan and then hearing this piece of it, when I knew they were connected, I just didn't know if this was an introduction to the entire thing happening all at once. So appreciate that very much. Should we, any other, you're Chang.
I forget that I'm sharing. Okay. I am okay with moving this to next week. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to at least take it to council work session for larger discussion and vote. But yeah, I'm for it.
Okay, so put that on discussion item, and if you would represent basically everything that you presented tonight for everyone. Did I just say something super weird?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was motion to.
Did I say the right things?
I know.
Say the right words. Okay. That,
Is there, we need to put a recommendation on the either like a,
We want,
the recommendation is to take it to work session to discuss. Are those the right words? I'm getting there. Right, and yes.
yes.
Design in terms of whether those cutouts and bump outs will fit or not. So you're actually going to not put that on the consent agenda because it's grant money being given to us?
I think that you are correct, and I would like to move that to the consent agenda. Thank you for pointing that out.
The committee's making, if I'm understanding what is happening, the committee's making a recommendation to approve the bid for construction. And is the committee making a recommendation to approve the alternates? That's the question I need clarification on.
Yes. We want to approve. And with that, I'm going to move on to motion to approve the June Public Works Committee meeting minutes.
yes.
Okay, approved. Is there any other business? Seeing none, I'm going to close this meeting. Thank you.